Hi, my name's Gwynne Richards. I'm a director of Apprise Consulting Limited. We're a logistics consultancy and training company. Today, we're looking at how to find additional space within our warehouses during these very challenging times. As a logistics consultant, a number of my projects have included finding additional space within warehouses for my clients. This is becoming increasingly so with the pressures of both COVID and Brexit. It's very rare that so many significant factors align to put increased pressure on today's warehouse operations. Both COVID and Brexit have produced challenges for warehouses up and down the country. They've resulted in warehouse operatives shortages and a lack of available space within our warehouses. I recently spent time with a 3PL on the request of one of my clients to see how some of these challenges could be overcome. The COVID pandemic and the dramatic increase in online shopping that it prompted resulted in the UK's e-commerce section enjoying the highest online sales growth in 12 years. Total online retail sales growth for 2020 was up 46% year on year, the highest annual growth since 2008, according to Statista. Here we can see the graph, and we can see the increase, big increase back in 2008, but now from 2019 to 2020, we can see this 46% growth. A great deal of that prompted by COVID. With this significant growth in e-commerce, we're also seeing a shortage in warehouse space and increased pressure on both own account and 3PL warehouses. The decision by US retailer Gap to close all of their UK stores and only sell online, and Boohoo buying the Debenhams brand to again only sell online, are examples of this growth in e-commerce. COVID has also triggered more online sales as people were unable to leave their homes. Also, when lockdown eased, all but essential stores were closed. I recently worked with an American client who split their warehousing between the Netherlands, their original European location, and the UK as a result of Brexit. The introduction of increased documentation and delays in terms of movements between the UK and mainland Europe has seen a number of European-based companies setting up in the UK, with some UK companies moving in the opposite direction to alleviate these delays. In their latest report, Savills state that there's a shortage of warehousing, with supply having fallen at its fastest pace ever and now stands at 24.87 million square feet, a fall of 7.15 million square feet since the start of the year. This fall in supply means that, at a national level, vacancy rates now stand at 4.33%, the lowest level since Savills started recording the metric, as we can see in this graph. So, how do companies manage this increased pressure on space in the short term? Well, as I mentioned, as a logistics consultant, it's safe to say that a large number of my consultancy projects have revolved around finding more space within existing warehouses. Here's a typical example. A 3PL was storing excess packaging for a confectionery company as their warehouse was full, with pallets stored in the aisles and in the inbound and outbound areas, bringing the operation to a near standstill. The company had a license to use images from a successful film franchise on their packaging for their annual Easter promotion. On examining the stock holding, it was found that they were still storing packaging relating to the first film in the franchise, with the fourth film already out in the cinemas. Although the 3PL gained revenue from the storage of the pallets long term, this space could have been used for current stock movements in and out regularly, thus increasing revenue for the 3PL through additional handling and alleviating problems at the confectionery company's warehouse. These pallets have been sat in those locations for over 3 years. Being proactive with customers by pointing out examples like this will enhance the customer 3PL relationship, although it's still a battle to convince the client's finance department that the stock is worth a lot less than they have it on their books. At the time, the price for recycled cardboard was relatively high, and it actually became beneficial to sell the cardboard for recycling. So, what tools can we use to overcome this space challenge? The concept of lean, which was associated with manufacturing originally, can now be used within warehouse operations. 5S as a concept was first introduced by Toyota. These 5 S's being, in the English version, sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. Now, there is a 6th S, which includes safety. But here we're just going to talk about sort and set in order. So in the previous example of the 3PL and the confectionery company, we see the principle of sort being introduced. Sort is all about examining your stock and doing one of 3 things: keeping it, returning it to the supplier if possible, or getting rid of. This is probably one of the hardest things to do. As I mentioned, with finance managers thinking that product is still worth some money on the books, it's quite difficult to write that product off. Yeah, also, just think about your own garages and loft space. When was the last time you looked at those areas? Which items could you actually throw away? In order for you to do this from a warehousing point of view, you need to undertake a comprehensive stock analysis. The use of an ABCDE analysis is ideal for this. You can classify the products as follows: A, for your high sellers; B, for your medium sellers; C, for very low to negligible sales. And then we have D, where these are items which can be sent maybe direct from your supplier to your customer, thus reducing your own storage requirements. And then we have E for exit, items that don't sell anymore. So having identified the E items, we need to know really, when was that last item ordered? When was it sold last? How many days, months, years sometimes of stock are you holding of that item? Can some of the items actually be returned to the seller? Yeah, you might have a sell or buyback scheme with your supplier. Note, if it's a new stock item, don't take action just yet. It might be that those sales haven't come in. In another example, a client had a warehouse where all the racking beams were at the same level, which made the warehouse look attractive, but there was a significant amount of empty cubic space because of the different pallet heights stored. Here we can see a typical example of this. Note the empty space above a number of the pallet locations. So that's a lot of wasted cubic space. When we suggested lowering the beams, adding additional beams to the racking, thus increasing the number of locations, this met with some resistance from the client. However, in the end, the additional space far outweighed the need to keep the aesthetics of the building and solve the issue of not enough available locations for the clients. So as we can see from the diagram here, we've lowered the beams, we've put in the right size pallet for the right size location. So rather than having all of the beams at the same level, we have different levels of beams, allowing us to have more locations. Another example, which came at a cost when I worked for a 3PL a few years ago, was the lack of consolidation of the same products. My customer employed a consultant to calculate the additional cost they had paid for pallet storage, where consolidation hadn't taken place. Products had arrived on separate containers at different times, in part pallet quantities, and therefore they were put away into separate locations. Where FIFO or batch management isn't an issue, there isn't a reason why those items can't be consolidated. This, of course, does depend on the way the warehouse management system is set up. There's also an initial additional handling cost, but that should be overcome by additional storage space being made available through consolidation. So in the above example, we see the concept of set in order being used. Setting order is all about finding a place for everything and putting everything in the most efficient and effective location. A number of warehouse management systems today have an opportunity where you can actually have the system telling you where to put the pallets rather than the operator choosing which location to put the pallet into. And the system can look at the size of the pallet, the weight of the pallet, also the velocity of that product as well, so that it ends up in the most efficient location. So these procedures can be introduced into an operation reasonably quickly. In the medium term, though, companies can look at the introduction of a mezzanine floor, for example, especially above the dock doors, if the height of the warehouse allows it. This space can be utilized for storage, carrying out value-adding services, or for additional office space. Another option is to change the racking configuration. If you're currently utilizing wide aisle racking, what about considering narrow aisle or very narrow aisle racking? This will require a change of handling equipment, but if storage is an issue, then this can be an option. Note, however, there can be a trade-off here. Additional storage capacity in very narrow aisle racking, for example, can increase the time for retrieval and put away. Other types of racking that can increase cubic space utilization include double deep, drive-in, flow, pushback, and mobile racks. Again, there's a trade-off here with issues in terms of FIFO for double deep, drive-in, and pushback racking. Speed of access is an issue with mobile racking, but it is an excellent form for long-term storage of slow-moving goods. Shuttle or satellite racking can overcome a number of the above issues, providing there's sufficient space on both sides for access at both ends. As for flow rack, the same product has to be stored on each level, but unlike drive-in racking, different products can be stored at different levels. So in this figure here, we can see that there's a comparison between the different rack types in terms of pallets stored. As you can see, shuttle racking can double the amount of pallet storage compared to wide aisle racking, utilizing the same amount of floor space. This diagram was provided by Dexian. Many companies now are turning towards automation and robotics to overcome two of the most pressing challenges facing warehouses today, namely a shortage of space and also people. In terms of goods-to-person systems, there's a choice between the 3D systems, such as automated storage and retrieval systems, ASRS, mini-load systems, the grid system pioneered by AutoStore, and the automated mobile robot systems, where robots transfer shelving from the compact storage area to a pick and pack station, as can be seen in this photograph here. So it takes up a lot of floor space, but it utilizes the floor space very well. However, unless multiple floors are introduced, this system doesn't use the full cubic capacity of the building, unlike, for example, the AutoStore system. There are also a couple of new systems from Exotech Solutions and Bionic Hive, which combine autonomous robots and 3D storage systems. Exotech Skypods climb the shelving to retrieve the totes and transfer to the pick area, as can be seen in the photograph. Whilst with Bionic Hive's squids, they climb racking, which has been modified with rails for the squids to climb vertically and traverse the racks and retrieve the product. Looking outside the warehouse, the addition of temporary buildings, as we can see in the photograph here, is also an option, providing there's sufficient space in the yard and planning permission can be gained. Some companies have also utilized shipping containers for additional storage in the yard. The pressure on space for warehouse operations is not going to ease within the short term. Companies need to think about how they're going to free up more space with their existing warehouses to cope with increasing demands for storage and for space to undertake more value-adding services for the e-commerce market. Hopefully, you can introduce some of the ideas mentioned above to find more space within your own warehouses. Thank you.